everyone. Welcome to the Naughty Shaman podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Carlisle, and I can't wait to dive in to a world where the sacred meets the wild and keeps things totally real. In each episode, we are going to dive into what it truly means to live a radiant life that is unapologetically real. And if you're ready to get started, so am I. Hello out there. This is Natalie Carlisle with the Naughty Shaman podcast. And I'm so grateful that you are joining me once again to explore some of life's wild sides, some of life's emotional nuances. And tonight what we're going to be talking about is something that has gone by the wayside in our cultural norms that is very critical, and more authors are writing about it. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about Brené Brown and some of the things that she has to offer on the subject of playfulness. Now, playfulness, when I say this, a lot of people go, what are we going to do? Team building, trust falls, kumbaya, what's going on? How do I schedule time to be playful? And so we're not talking about any of those things. What we're talking about is this attitude of joy, of playfulness, of spontaneity. And this has fallen by the wayside in our culture because of the deep roots of defining individual self-worth with net worth. And we talked a little bit about this in the last podcast. We talked a little bit about how it's a little bit dangerous for us to attach our self-worth to our net worth because our net worth fluctuates and it has nothing to do with the value that we add on the planet. It's a construct of humankind to kind of have a measuring stick to compare to one another. And if you truly want to be a naughty shaman and break free from some of these cultural norms, then stop comparing. It's one of the first and hardest practices, especially if you're on social media at all. But we have to stop comparing ourselves to one another. I got super funky last month, I guess it was 2 months ago. Just being on social media more, just started to get my comparison juices coming up. And some people, when they compare themselves as always above. And some people, when they compare themselves as always below. And either of these are linked to suffering. They just cause suffering, and neither of them are true because we can't compare our lives to one another. We are all so immersed in our own experience of life that there is absolutely no way that we could compare them. Even if you have similar situations, there's no way to compare. So in order to increase playfulness immediately, one must stop comparing and maybe even going on social media. I swear, but I digress. So I want to talk tonight about playfulness and how it has such benefits in our lives, truly deep improvements can be found in our life. It's like a lubricant in many ways in our lives, in more ways than one. And so, your joints, when you don't have enough of that synovial fluid, they get cranky and hurt. And then when we use them, it sort of makes everything a little more fluid in our physical bodies. The same is true for playfulness as the synovial fluid, the lubricant in our life, whether how we do the dishes, how we make love, how we make cookies, all of those things can be enriched by adopting an attitude of playfulness. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. First, I want to get into why this topic is important and how it came to be. I was rereading, and I have a number of books that I reread, and one of them is this book. If you don't have it as a reference book in your library of motivational self-help books, then this book called The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown is one of my must-have books. I've purchased it for all of my children. I give it away to my clients. I have several copies of it that are all bookmarked and underlined. And I use it in my yoga classes. I use it in many, many places because the wisdom is very accessible in this book. I mean, it's only 131 pages, 132 pages long. And you can read each chapter of that book in one sitting. Each chapter is 2 or 4 pages. That's it. And you get these nuggets of wisdom. And the one that I happened to kind of open to this week was about playfulness and rest. And one of the quotes that she shares in this chapter is a quote from Dr. Stuart Brown, who is a well-known psychiatrist. And he has this great quote about playfulness. And he says, "The opposite of playfulness is not work. The opposite of playfulness is depression." I've read that line before in the book. I actually had it underlined, but there was something about reading it this time that had me gobsmacked. It was like I got punched in the face by truthy bits, and I thought about that. I had to close the book and really start to contemplate this idea of playfulness's opposite being depression. Now, my family has inherited depression from a long lineage of women and men who've suffered through the Great Depression and other depressions along the way. And so those codes for depression are in our lineage for sure. And I was thinking about how my daughter and I combat depressive states or depressive moods or those heavy moods that come when depression starts to look around the corner like, "Hey, you want to play?" And we're like, "No, we don't want to play with you, you evil friend." Then what we do, we have dance parties and we paint and we do weird stuff like art or repaint the kitchen. We do things that have no purpose. None whatsoever. Like Zentangle, no purpose. I don't give those away. I don't talk about them. These little tiny drawings on these little, 4x4 cards have no purpose except that they are fun. They're fun for me. And this is something that is the definition of playfulness, is that it has no purpose. You're not looking to sell the things that you're doing while you're playing. You're not looking to influence somebody. You're not looking to make yourself do something because you should. That's a play killer right there. And playfulness has to do with absolutely no purpose. Playfulness can look like staring out a window and trying to identify the birds that come to the bird feeder. It's one of my favorite pastimes. It's one of my playfulness things that'll get me out of a funk right away, is just to start to enjoy the colors of birds and where do they migrate from and learn about birds. Am I ever going to be an instructor of bird or ornithology or let's go find them or get binoculars and go on these wild hikes out in the woods? No, that's not for me. It's not the hobby and what I use it for. What I use it for is nothing. I use my hobby of bird watching for nothing. Which brings me to one of the blockers of play that we have. One of the things that blocks our willingness to play and our ability to play is deep feelings of shame or guilt because we are not being productive. Again, that comes up again and again. We are so conditioned by our culture of productivity, which, by the way, started in the Industrial Revolution. We are now several evolutions beyond that, and we are still addicted to production in the same way. If I go into a service company for consulting on leadership and team development, the productivity measures are the thing that the sun rises and sets with. And there's this push to productivity measures in creative businesses and in creative markets. I am not 100% sure that that's the correct measure to get the most creative ideas that will serve the most customers and increase your profit share. So there has to be a counterbalance to this productivity, and it, in my opinion, is play. Play is the counterbalance. And I don't mean like go play basketball or an organized sport, although pickleball is the best thing that ever happened in my life. Super fun because nobody cares. We're not uber competitive. We have a blast and it's super social. So again, I play pickleball for no purpose whatsoever. But productivity and play need to find a friendship in your world, in my world, and in organizational health, because this idea of playfulness is an attitude. It's an attitude of bringing levity, lightness, joy into the atmosphere. I have to talk about depression if we're going to talk about joy, or if we're going to talk about playfulness, because that's its opposite. So I started to dig in. I mean, I love doing just enough research to be dangerous. And so one of the things that I was looking at today is, if with the organization Gallup, they do all kinds of polls, all kinds of studies. Well, they looked at 5,100, so 5,100 people that have been a part of this regular program they're using as the mental health index. And the most recent publication about this mental health index is about the massive increase in reported depression among adults over the since 2017. So I don't know how many years that is. Math is very difficult for me on the fly. So since 2017, there has been a significant increase, almost a 10% increase in women and a 6% increase in men. Those actual numbers, if you're a dork and you're kind of like these things, is that, the increase for women, according to Gallup and this survey, is that in 2017, 26.2% of women reported having the illness. And in 2023, the number went up to 36.7. So that's like a 26% to all the way to 37% increase in depression reported among women between 2017 and 2023. Ouch. Now, one could say that's because more women are comfortable reporting it now than ever before, because it is starting to lose its stigma. Or it could also be because there are more episodes of it, more people experiencing depression. And I would argue that it's both the increase in people experiencing depression and the comfort in reporting it. Because one of the things that leads to depression are feelings of meaninglessness. There it is, a lot of nesses. Meaninglessness contributes to depression significantly. And in our world today, there is a sense of often hopelessness and meaninglessness. There's a sense of a lack of purpose to this life. As culturally, we broke up with organized religion. There's a huge study on this and how that has changed over the last 10 years. But essentially, U.S. citizens are breaking up with organized religion in favor of finding spiritual truths. More people are reporting spiritual but not religious in the surveys where they're taking these studies to heart. And when we broke up with the church, we broke up almost with spirit. And this is one of the factors that I believe is contributing to the increase in depression, is that we don't know as a culture where to take our soulful wounds, our emotional wounds, our mental wounds. We used to have people in the neighborhood that we could talk to in a safe way about that. And now the trust in those organized religions is down. And so nobody is talking to people about that. So what happens is people are not talking about it very much at all, unless they have the good fortune of insurance that covers mental health. And then they are, by chance, talking to psychiatrists or psychologists or counselors. But that is not everyone. And so there are many influences to depression. This is a podcast not about depression, but about playfulness. So I want to highlight this idea that as the world becomes a little heavier, that we need to increase this sense of joy and playfulness and lightness in the world. And it is a mood that we can shift quite easily. And we'll talk about some of the strategies for shifting a mood from depression to playfulness. There are things you can do that will absolutely, almost 100% guaranteed shift your mood. The only thing missing is our commitment to it. And our commitment to it, to feeling good, to feeling light, sometimes becomes weak. Our commitment becomes weak because we feel a little bit guilty and a little bit shameful that we're not adding value, quote unquote, somewhere in the world. I give you permission right now. And I'm giving myself permission. Like as I'm talking to you, I'm talking to myself, because I'm giving myself permission as well to get off the production hamster wheel. to really savor and relish in those times of play. And there are so many different kinds. There is nature play where you just go out in nature and follow a bug around. When was the last time you did that? I did that a couple days ago for about 5 minutes. It felt like an hour, 5 minutes of time. And it was rejuvenating to my soul to just follow this weird, it was like a June bug, I think. It was a June bug. It wasn't a Japanese beetle. It was a June bug, and they're coming early. And I was like, what are you doing out here, friend? And so I kind of watched it walk down the golf path and go through some grass. And I kind of got to know some of the ants that were hanging out in the grass and the golf course, and just having this moment of mindfulness with nature is a wonderful way to bring play into your world. So it doesn't have to look like you drinking beers and out with your friends and singing karaoke in a wild night out, line dancing or whatever. It can, but it doesn't have to all the time. For those among us who are a bit quieter, and that's me most of the time now, I'm really kind of a homebody. I do like to go out and rip it up sometimes, but it's not as often as it used to be, that's for sure. I relish in these quiet moments of playfulness, of serenity, of frivolity. So let's talk again about that quote. The opposite of playfulness is not work, it's depression. And so that's almost an invitation to make playfulness a priority in your life. Really. Because what's at stake is your mental health. And then if your mental health is not good, you know that goes all the way down through your emotional health and your physical health. So mental health needs to be a priority on our list. Whether we suffer from mental health, diagnoses or diseases or troubles in any way or not, if you are a mentally healthy person, you still need to prioritize mental health because you don't want to lose it. You don't want to minimize or trivialize the importance of your mental health. I just saw an interview with Simone Biles. She just kicked some butt in this interview where she was talking about how when she decided not to go and compete, I think it was in balance beam in the Olympics, the last Olympics, how the world, half of them were praising and half of them were just grilling her and judging her in a negative light because apparently athletes aren't allowed to be human and they need to be superhuman and they aren't allowed to favor or prioritize their mental health. And she had this great interview about how ridiculous that was and how that moment actually inspired her to reclaim mental health as her priority even stronger. And so, man, we can all take a page out of that book. We can all take a page out of Simone Biles' book and reclaim it as a priority. So play has some positive effects. Remember how I was calling it like the lubricant in our lives in many ways? When we become playful, we're letting down our guard. We're letting down our facades. We're letting down the parts that we use to hide who we really are. And at the human sense of worth comes from feeling seen, being seen, and seeing ourselves. And we can truly see ourselves in moments of play. And that is huge because when we let go of the ego that's trying to protect us from looking foolish or being embarrassed, when we can let go of that just a little bit, what we allow into our lives is a huge flood of neurobiological chemicals. So we can get the dopamine, the serotonin, the endorphins, and the not oxytocin. Yeah, oxytocin, that's right. I often mix that up with oxycodone, but no, we don't want that. We want oxytocin. So those neurotransmitters are just so helpful in creating health, helping us lose weight, helping us be healthy, helping our hormones function well. So playfulness has significant health benefits as well. And it sounds hard. I've worked with so many clients. I can think of this client, let's call her Sarah. That was not her name, protecting the innocent, right? But I had this client who was like, yeah, I need to be more playful. And then she would look in the Rolodex of where is playful? Where do I know playful from? And as she was looking through her past, she realized that she hadn't really experienced playfulness, even as a child, even on the playground. Even on the playground, she shared a story of how she used to kind of hang out with the teachers who were disciplining the other children from doing dangerous things. And so from the ripe young age of 5 and 6 years old, she was already in the habit of judging things as good or bad, right and wrong. And then because she was helping out the teachers in that way, she was praised for it over and over, how responsible she was, how good she was, what a leader she was. And so these behaviors kept repeating. And they repeated more and more and more again, that she became a little bit afraid of letting go of that control, of that disciplined judgment, and enjoying herself again. This was having an impact on work because people were sharing that she was just too serious. And when she worked on the teams, it was hard to work with her because it was hard to get to know her. It was hard to understand her. It affected her marriage because the playfulness in the relationship and the teasing, it wasn't there. Everything was so serious and so important, and lots of responsibility was the foundation of the marriage, which in the beginning was wonderful because this gentleman found a partner that wasn't going to be frivolous and undermining, was going to be very responsible, very forthright. And what great qualities those are. But in the bedroom, they were having trouble because of the playfulness and spontaneity and the comfort in that vulnerable spot of allowing yourself to be a little bit goofy, a little bit out of control, wasn't available to her. And so when I began working with them, these were sort of the things that we were dealing with. And it really was starting to hurt her that she couldn't find those files for playfulness, for spontaneity, and for fun. So one strategy that she tried was to create fun events for herself and her spouse along the way. And that worked to some degree. It's a very type A approach to creating fun in your life. And it works for many, many people. Like schedule a time to go rock climbing, schedule a time to go to a fire ceremony you've never been to, go schedule a time to go ice skating, schedule a time to go do these things, to go see a musical play, to go a musical theater, to go see something, the symphony, a rock concert, anything that's out of the ordinary for you. And even some of the things that are ordinary, but do them with a sense of spontaneity. So that's one strategy that can help those folks that really do want to keep a schedule and keep a hold of that. Now, the thing with this client is that when she made the commitment to bring playfulness and joy and lightness of being more into her life, it wasn't like she was choosing that over the responsibility, over instead of the ideas, the moral compass. She gets to keep those gifts of responsibility, being responsible and having a moral compass. She gets to keep those gifts. But now what we're working on is adding in the playfulness, adding in the spontaneity, and adding in the letting go of the rigid armor that she had created over many, many years of trying to protect herself from criticism. So this is just one example of how joy can change your life. So I'll give you an update. As we were working, the first step was start to schedule these things and start to break up with the shame and guilt of having fun, of enjoying. And she came from a long line of people who were Irish and worked hard, and that was their pride and joy. And it was a bit of their self-identity. We work, we don't mess around, and we get her done. And so that was another factor into the inability to have joy in her life. So as we continued to work, healing those wounds, bringing in soul retrievals that have been lost and that completely understand joy on a visceral and somatic level, then she began to understand that, wow, I can bring joy deliberately into my life and just do things for no reason. So there would be some times when we would be in a coaching session on Zoom and all of a sudden she would just go, because a song came on the radio. Now this like 3-second joy, like that was done for no reason. There's no reason to have a little jazz interlude right now, nor was there in her coaching session, but just that moment of moving her body and listening to music and letting it move through her was joy. So she was already beginning to incorporate these moments of joy in everyday practices. You can be in the grocery line. Now, how many of you get so mad that you're in the grocery line for as long as you are, and everybody's like counting pennies to pay at the end, or they have a credit card problem and you're like, oh my gosh, I just want to get home. Instead of that attitude, how can you bring playfulness into this moment? And that's the second strategy. Number 1 is schedule it, make it deliberate. And number 2 is make it deliberate and in your life that you're doing right now. So it's not on the schedule. You're just going to bring it to wherever you are. And so one of the ways I sometimes will play a little bit in the grocery line is just chat with people around me. Like, hey, how are you doing today? Yeah. And then, it's usually about the weather or something like that. But then, you got groceries like, hey, Jell-O, looks good. My favorite's lime. Oh my God, did you have Jell-O when you were a kid? Now you're talking about childhood with a total stranger. And it's kind of fun if you're a people person. If you're not a people person, the kind of things that you can have fun in the grocery line is that you can kind of read through the People magazine or the Enquirer magazine and start to think of each of the players that are in the headlines there as, movie stars. And if they're already movie stars, you can start to think of them as from another planet. And if they're already seem to be from another planet, then, all these things. There are ways to bring play. You can dance to music that's in your own head. I invite you, if you're just new at play, I invite you to do something very public that's a subtle form of play, like just like 3 snaps, 3 beats of a song in your head and dance to it in the grocery aisle, at the line at the bank, in your car at a stoplight, and then giggle, like really laugh at yourself. Those 2 practices start with 3 seconds of courage, 3 beats of courage, and then notice that there are probably people looking at you, and laugh. And notice you didn't die. Nobody came to burn you at the stake. Nobody ridiculed you or threw rocks at you. It's safe for you now to be playful and not so serious. And when we practice those 3 seconds of courage in public, allow ourselves to be seen being a little bit goofy and chuckle, then we realize, okay, I'm okay. There's a little more freedom to play, a little more freedom to be your kooky, quirky self. And that will increase your endorphins, your dopamine levels, which will help your body function better and lubricate your whole life, the conversations you have, the bedroom moments that you have, the cookies that you're going to bake, the love that you're going to make. All those things just get better and better with a little bit of playfulness. So those are my strategies today. My darlings, one of the ways to fight against the depression that may come into your lives, even by a little bit, and even if you don't have depression, one of the things that you can keep increasing your health with is playfulness. Just playfulness and spontaneity. And you can add it into your life by deliberately scheduling time for it. Or deliberately scheduling time for unstructured time. Like I have sections of my calendar that are just like Natalie does whatever she wants to do for these 3 hours. And sometimes I go for a walk without the dog, which I feel extremely guilty for having fun without the dog because he usually goes with me. And I just look at things. It's like a little forest bathing for myself. Just plug into nature. It's hard to do that sometimes with your dog because they always need something if it's like Milo. So do that. Schedule unstructured time where you can rest, sleep, read, sing a song, stare out a window, count birds, whatever. Schedule unstructured time and allow that. If you're overcommitted, you have to start saying no to things. I mean, you do. What are you doing it for anyway? Are you getting a gold star? Did I not hear about that? Like you get a gold star in life if you do the most? I missed that memo. And I'm glad. I'm glad. I'm glad. Here's a little tip from me to you. This is top secret. One of the things I do in my life. So I'm a Franklin planner junkie. So here's my planner for the week, right? And I pick these things that are right here on this list are the things I have to do this week to feel productive. You know how many it is? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 things I have to do by Sunday night. That's it. All the rest of these little to-dos are kind of nice to haves. And some of these actually make it onto the day. But 5 things. I have 5 things to do this week to make me feel productive. And you know what? It's all getting done. It's all getting done. So you can do it too. I promise you're not going to become a lazy, unproductive sloth that's homeless and lives with cats. I promise. If I haven't yet, neither are you going to. There is an exploration that I'm inviting you into about joy. So schedule the time for joy and playing, or schedule unstructured time and leave space in the agenda of your life. And the second thing that you can do is to bring play, a playfulness to life, wherever you are, whenever you need it. And do it on a 3-beat count or a 2/4 time. Boom. This is Natalie Griffin signing off from Naughty Shaman, where we like to keep the sacred a little bit wild and totally real. Thank you so much for listening. We love you. Mwah. If you're hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, we are so grateful. Please reach out to us. Let us know what topics you'd like to see covered in our future episodes. Get in touch in the comments because we love to hear from you. And you can reach us on social media.